and there are oftentimes list of their students and their accommodations.
Good afternoon. I'm Ginger Stone, and I will be talking with you today about district pacing guides. I am the CTE director and the CIMC for Sampson County Schools. I hope you're enjoying your summer conference. I know I am. I have attended some great sessions. I'm glad you chose to attend this session because it creates a learning opportunity for me to share ideas with you and get new ideas so that I can take something back to Sampson County Schools. So why are we here? We're here today so that I can talk about how we incorporate pacing guides into our daily planning at Sampson County Schools. There are two focuses that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about pacing guides with the state assessment in mind, and then we're going to talk about pacing guides with PBMs and credentials in mind. For our first focus, I'm going to share with you how we use district pacing guides in Sampson County Schools to include providing benchmarks to drive instruction, addressing transfers, student issues, and monitoring teacher progress. I'm not going to go into great detail right here, but I'll do that a little later on. Our second focus on the slide is focused around PBMs. As I mentioned, Sampson County Schools use district pacing guides for years, but with the implementation of PBMs and credentials, we need to reevaluate our pacing guide process and determine if there is flexibility with our pacing guides to allow for modifying instruction with PBMs and credentials. I have a video and some quotes for our thought for today to get us warmed up and ready to discuss pacing guides. Sit back and enjoy. There's going to be a link posted. Okay, you have to press the play button to get the video to play.
There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
So what does the video have to do with the pacing guides? Give me a few minutes and I'll connect those dots for you. I did have some pictures on there, but I'm not sure what happened to those. But if you think back to the video, the escalator is our pacing guide. The escalator helps move people from place to place in a timely manner if it's working. Just like our pacing guides help teachers move from objective to objective in a timely manner if it's working. Both items are tools that help us manage our day. So let's think about the people. Let's think of the people on the escalator or on the pacing guide as our teachers. The people on the escalator were asking for help when it stopped moving, just like our teachers ask us for help when they get stuck in the curriculum. Now, they may not physically come out and ask you for help, but there are ways that we know that those teachers are struggling. So, is the introduction of PBMs and credentials going to affect our pacing guides, which is our tool to help teachers manage their day? So now let's talk about the serviceman that came up at the end of the video. He came to fix the escalator. So I think of that serviceman as me or as our support staff. He came to help the people on the escalator by fixing it. So that is what our teachers expect of us when we come to try to help them fix whatever issues they're having. At the beginning of the year, I was working with teachers and I realized that the PBMs didn't quite fit in with our process that we had put in place to help teachers prepare students for the state assessment. So with COVID, we made some modifications to our process, but we were kind of stuck at that point. We moved on, put a Band-Aid over it, and we were going to come back and address that at a later time. So now, let's look at the second part of my thought for today. It says, always plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And if plan A doesn't work, the alphabet has 25 more letters. In the video, part A didn't work because the escalator stopped and the people couldn't get to the next floor. At Sampson County Schools, I've been working with Plan A for years. With the addition of PBMs, do we need to come up with a new plan? And if we do, that's okay, because we should always plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, and there are always 25 more letters in the alphabet. So we could do a B, C, D, and on and on and on if needed. Before we get into the meat of the presentation, and I'd like to know what roles are represented in our group. Ann and them's going to post a link to a link in the chat for you to indicate what role you play in your district. I see some CIMCs, CDCs, CT directors. I see some teachers. Give you a few more minutes to complete that.
And Ginger, you probably see some folks are putting it in the chat, and I'm sure others are putting it in the link to the Google form as well. So you may want to look at both.
Okay, thank you, Ann. I see a SPC in the chat. So it looks like we have good representation of all the major areas that will be involved in the pieces considering pacing guides. So why district pacing guides? Let's look at why Sampson County Schools chose to implement district pacing guides. And this is where I told you we would go into a little bit more detail. Okay, we're going to go to the next one in the cup. As we work with teachers in our district, we discovered that we needed some curriculum supports around some certain areas. As we talk about individual instruction, as we talked about prior knowledge and reteaching and student growth, we decided to implement benchmarks to help provide support for teachers around these areas. So we'll talk about each one. We started out with the pre-assessment. The pre-assessment helped the teachers look at prior knowledge, and we'd already been talking about that in the past. They were more familiar with the pre-assessments and looking at where their students were. But they were having to create their own pre-assessment. So they were excited when I told them I would create those for them. They're 100-item tests, and the items on the test were based on the weights of the blueprint. They were set up just like the state assessment was. And that also gave the students the opportunity to get familiar with that state assessment format. Those pre-assessments are administered within the first 10 days of school. And we allow 10 days because in our district or in our LEA, we have lots of change the first 10 days. Students come in and out, they transfer in, they transfer out, they move from this school to that school, from this class to that class. So within those first 10 days, they're locked in after that 10th day. So we allow the first 10 days for the teachers to administer those pre-assessments. But I try to get them to administer the very first of the semester as possible so that we can actually know what where they're actually at in that curriculum and what prior knowledge that they have. So they look at their data, they make those determinations, and then they come up with a plan on where to meet the students at in the curriculum. The next piece we implemented was midterms. Our midterms allow the teachers to look at what they've taught up to a certain point and reteach in the areas that they needed to as far as the midpoint of the semester. So midterms are 50-question tests, and again, I make those district assessments, and they cover the objectives up to the 45th day, so that it's a smooth. I try not to split a standard in half, so anywhere between the 40th and the 45th day, and teachers know that day one, they know when they pull their pacing guides that around that 40th day, they have to be ready to do that midterm. So the pacing guides helps our teachers stay on track in the curriculum. And occasionally I have to adjust those pacing guides. So if we have a field test, and that's the first time a teacher's taught that test, and they're trying to provide feedback to DPI, I have on occasions adjusted those pacing guides. I may have to not test as many standards, but I work with those teachers individually. That is the only exception that I make when I'm doing my midterms, because I want that teacher to have covered at least half of that curriculum so that they don't get lost and not have an opportunity to cover the entire curriculum with the students. So the last piece is our mock post assessments. Our mock post assessments are the same it's the very same test as the pre-assessment. I just rename it as the mock or the final. It's given 3 to 4 weeks before the end of the semester, and this again gives the teacher a look at what the students have gained proficiency in the areas that they need to reteach. It also gives the teachers to look at how much their students have grown up to that point. Now, when we implemented this, we did have to provide some PD around some areas. So I pulled some of my champion teachers who were using the data from Power School and using the reports and how they would look at what standards were low and how they went back and retaught. And I had them to present to the other CTE teachers. So we had some PD around that. And then we do data talks with the teachers, and they get this in several formats. They're required to have PLCs at their schools. So our CDCs lead data talks with the teachers during their PLCs. Those are required by the administrator, not by me. So they lead those data talks with the teachers. Other administrators, our secondary director is CTE person, the former CTE person, so she likes to go in and talk with them as well about their data. And our instructional coach as well. They look at that data and they talk with teachers, especially our beginning teachers, and help them understand the processes and how they need to use the data from those benchmarks. We also discovered an issue with students transferring within the district. I have 4 traditional high schools in our LEA, and students would transfer from high school to high school, and they may transfer from Midway to Union, which is at both ends of my district, and one teacher may be on one objective, and the other teacher may be 3 or 4 or 5 objectives away from that, and then that here comes this student, and they either lose that information, or the teacher has to do a plan. It just is a messy situation. Or we may have a teacher who has bounced around and have their objectives in a different order. So then that student is really in a mess, because all through the semester, there may be missing gaps in what they're getting. So when we implemented pacing guides, that corrected that issue. If a student leaves Midway now and goes to Union, that teacher is close to the same place as the other teacher was. Now, with that also came the issue for those teachers who did bounce around in their reorder their objectives. So what they had to do was come together as a program area, and if it was important enough, they had to convince their counterparts, and they had to agree on an order they wanted their objectives to be taught. They gave that to me, and that's how I built their assessments, and that's how we worked with those teachers when principals or whomever needed to know where they were in the curriculum. Curriculum monitoring. So with the pacing guides, that allowed us to monitor teacher progress. Now notice I said monitor teacher progress and not, we want to inspect what we expect, but we want to inspect teacher progress and not inspect the pacing guide. We don't want the pacing guide to be the focus. We want that focus to be teacher progress. So the principal now has a tool. That pacing guide is a tool. They now have a tool where they can know at any time during the day, during the week, during the month, during the semester, whenever, where that teacher should be in that curriculum. And we've talked about administrators already. I meet with teachers twice a year, and I check those materials. I check their pacing guide. I check their curriculum guide. I talk with them about where they're at in their curriculums and those kinds of things. The secondary director as well. If she walks into a classroom and wants to know where the teachers are, they can immediately show where they're at in that curriculum. CDCs and instructional coaches as well. And in the past, we've discovered, and when I would go around and meet with teachers, I discovered that our new, as well as some of our veteran teachers, they were still teaching. If a curriculum had been updated, they were still teaching from the old curriculum. So now as I go around and I check their pacing guides, then I know that they're using the latest curriculum materials. So we've talked about data analysis and teacher conversations. One additional curriculum issue that we were having was that teachers would end up and have more curriculum to teach, and they'd run out of days to teach it. And on the flip side, they would have a whole lot of days left and have finished the curriculum way early. So somewhere along there, somebody didn't get enough time on their curriculum. So the pacing guide helps with those issues as well. Now let's talk about how to develop our district pacing guide. But before I do, how many of you use district pacing guides in your LEA? In the chat, type yes if you use them or no if you don't. So I have some idea. If you're already using district pacing guides or anything around that in your LEA. Okay, I see some no's and some yeses. So for those of you who do not who do not use a pacing guide, I'm going to walk you through the process that we use. For those of you who do, please share comments for clarification or suggestions at any point that I'm presenting something that could improve the process that we use. Remember, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, and I'm not afraid to use the other letters in the alphabet. So let's get started. I built our district pacing guides from the blueprint. For a few years, blueprints were housed in Vault. Then DPI started creating course users guides, which included the pacing guide, which made me very happy. As we've heard in our sessions, when those blueprints were moved over to CTE admin, we lost that feature for the pacing guide. However, Misty's working on that, but in the meantime, you'll be able to create your own pacing guides manually after this presentation. If you want to follow along with me, you can take a few minutes and pull up CTE admin, and we'll go through the steps step by step. And if not, you can follow and look at my screenshots on the screen. So I'll give you a few minutes if anybody wants to log into CTE admin. Okay, I hope you're ready. So if you're in CTE admin, you'll go to courses on the right-hand side over here, and you click on courses, and then you're going to see CTE course management system. You'll need to click on that. When you click on that, you'll type in the course the blueprint you want to pull up. So in my example, I used Principles of Business. So once you pull that up, it's going to look like this. This is your blueprint. This is what you'll get when you pull that up. When you click on Course Standards, you'll pull up this blueprint. And then once you get the blueprint on the screen, if you look up here in the top left-hand corner, it says to download to a CSV file. So you want to download it to a CSV file, and then you want to save it as an Excel workbook. And it'll look like this. So this is what is going to become your pacing guide. So I take the blueprint when it's in Excel, and I save as much of that blueprint as I can. And if you'll look here, there is I can't read that on here, but that far left corner, I deleted that column. There was nothing in it, and I added days. So with your days, to calculate your days, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the course weight, which is right here, by the number of actual days of instruction. So on a semester or a 90-minute block, on a semester, you have 90 days. So I would use anywhere from 80 to 85 days to calculate my pacing guides. So then you will write a formula. And if you look right, here's my formula. You would go to C2, and that pulls your percentage, and you would multiply that times ever how many days of instruction that you're going to use. And I use 85. Like I said, you take out if you're going to have field trips or assemblies, those kind of things. So I used 85 for this one. And then when you hit enter, it calculates the number of days that you should spend on this particular standard. Now, on some blueprints, it's broken down by each individual objective. You have percentages for all of these, and these will add up to your standard. And then you just copy that down, and once you do that, you will have your pacing guide. Okay, and here are the steps. Here are the steps that we follow. Now, right in here where I was talking about your formula, on the one that we used previously, if you see it set up on percents. If it's not set up on percent, all you have to do is add divide by 100. Once I have developed all of my pacing guides, I save them I save those, I pass them off to my administrative assistant, and then she puts them on a website. So come day one of the semester, she will, they will go to the website, that they log in, and they get their pacing guides that they're going to need for the year. So I'm going to stop there and see if I have any questions about pacing guides so far and how we use those with the state assessment to help guide teachers through the curriculum and make sure they're prepared for that state assessment. The students are prepared. Do I have any questions or comments or anything from the first part of the presentation? No questions? Okay. If we have no questions, we are going to move right on along. How does district pacing guides work for PBMs? Remember, after the escalator video, I said that we were stuck and needed to reevaluate our process to include PBMs and credentials. So when I was asked to present on pacing guides, my first thought was, absolutely, I can do that. We've done this for years, so it won't take me long to pull together a presentation. Well, a few days later, I received an email asking if I could include something about pacing guides and the flexibility with formative assessment and PBMs. So if you have a PBM, is that pacing guide going to be flexible so that teachers can go back and reteach during that time? So I had a chance to discover earlier on that the PBMs did not fit smoothly into our process. So this gave me a perfect opportunity to sit down, look back at what we had already done at the beginning of the semester. That's when I realized that our PBMs didn't quite fit into our process that well. So this gave me an opportunity to kind of plan forward and reevaluate our process. So this is where I'm going to need your help. Here you can see, a minute. In preparation and getting ready for this presentation and to help plan forward for Sampson County Schools, I sent out emails to teachers, to IMCs, to CIMCs. I talked with Misty. I talked with our instructional coaches as well and asked for suggestions on what we could do to help teachers with these PBMs and preparing students, and to include that flexibility with formative assessments and being able to reteach. What I discovered was I was not alone. Others were just starting to think about PBMs, credentials, formative assessments, and how to modify instruction. So I started brainstorming. If you look at the bottom of the screen, these are the PBMs that we offer in Sampson County Schools. So I pulled all of my PBMs, and I decided to use Animal Science 1 as the example for this presentation. I realized that all the PBMs had a common piece, and this common piece was a connection between the PBM and the blueprint. So if you look at my example, I have a portion of the Animal Science PBM at the top of the pacing guide. At the top of the screen. And at the bottom, I have the pacing guide for Animal Science 1. You will notice that the PBM document has the objective listed for each topic. So if you look right here on the PBM, it says public speaking, ES, that's Essential Standards 1.0. So what I did in my column, I had put a column on my pacing guide, just like I did days. I put a column for PBM. I went and I put number 2 for Standard 1. If you look, leadership and FFA also came from Essential Standard number 1, or was covered. So I put that on there as well. And then number 4, that one was tied to number Standard 2. So I put that standard 2, number 4 down beside standard 2. And I followed that process throughout the entire pacing guide. So when I finished, this is what it looked like. Here you can see the entire Animal Science 1 pacing guide with the PBM information. A teacher can now clearly see where they are on the PBM while they are teaching. This gives them an opportunity to use formative assessment to measure student proficiency and reteach when assigning the PBM to the students. So if I'm a teacher and I'm looking at my pacing guide and I'm planning, I can see that once I cover standards 1 and standards 2, then my students should then be ready to tackle 2, 3, and 4 on their PBM. So as I'm teaching, before I would complete 1, I would do some type of formative assessment or something to monitor student proficiency to see how well they grasped that information. And then if they didn't, I would know that I would need to go back and work on that area some more. And then I would do that through the pacing guide. So then once I finished, my students would have covered all of their objectives. They would have been prepared for the PBM. Now you'll see a column over here for credential. We're going to do the same thing with the credential. I just didn't have all of the credential information to do that with. So my next step is to bring our teachers together at our back to school meeting and give them time to plan. They're going to meet together in program areas, and those who teach light courses will have an opportunity to look at this document. I'll have these created for them, and they're going to look at this document and they can talk about formative assessments that they use for each one of these areas, so that when they leave that meeting, everyone should be able to have some solid formative assessments that they use. They can even decide to use the same ones, and we could have district formative assessments if we wanted to, if we have time for that. But that's kind of the plan that I have in place for our teachers. And then we're going to also do the same thing for credentials, like I said earlier, but with the credential piece, the teacher is going to have to do that crosswalk for me. Now, here's where you come in. This is the plan that I have worked on for our teachers. What I want to know now is what kind of ideas do you have, or suggestions that you have with incorporating PBMs with the pacing guide and to consider formative assessments in that process. Anna's going to post a link to a Padlet. And if you would, on that Padlet, if you would take some time and just share with us any ideas that you might have. I'm seeing some great ideas. Okay, I see one that says that they're going to have their teachers to calculate their pacing guides and make sure they understand where they're at and that the students are getting what they need. So if I'm understanding correctly, your teachers will be calculating the pacing guides. So you're going to do training with those teachers, or will you do those district wide? I know in our LEA, if I didn't do it district wide, I don't think all of our teachers would participate. They would sit down and draw out based on what they wanted to teach, and that's kind of what we had ran into when we first started doing district pacing guides. Okay, I had some great comments there. Thank you for participating. Let's see. In Union County, we train our neighbors how to configure the pacing guides, and then so they can Absolutely. Our teachers do the same thing. Once I provide the district pacing guide, I have some that transferred over to the monthly calendar. They just love seeing it. They just have to see it laid out on that monthly calendar. And when I go around and check, I'm okay with that. They just have to make sure they show me that original pacing guide so I can check those dates, because I want them to make sure they're using the current materials. And you're absolutely correct about teachers not understanding how to calculate the percentages. That's one of the reasons why we did district ones. When teachers said they were doing pacing guides before we started the district, what I discovered was that they were just plotting out what they felt like it needed to be. So I absolutely agree with you. Are there any other questions or comments or thoughts about our pacing guides? So if there are no more questions, Please remember to complete your survey on the left side of your screen there. And I want to thank you for participating today. I hope you have a wonderful 2021-22 school year. We're finishing up a little bit early, so you've got some extra time. Here is my contact information. I'll be glad to help in any way that I can. So please reach out to me if there's any way that I can help you. Hope you have the rest of the a good rest of the conference, and I will be seeing you around again. Thank you.